This is Chris with the Ancient Scholar. I hope this video finds you all doing well. I'm going to do an end-of-year update regarding the COVID-19 situation we find ourselves in. This is going to be primarily in the context of a citizen of the United States and the situation as I understand it, as I see it here in North America, more specifically the United States. This may be a bit more flippant than some of my past videos regarding the COVID-19 situation. So if you don't want to hear me perhaps opine on a few areas I find concerning, then this just may not be the video for you. So with that caveat in mind, let's go ahead and pivot into the core content of what I want to discuss, and that's the situation as we find ourselves in it. And, as far as Omicron goes, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about it. As far as the data goes, we have gotten some more data, and I don't know. It certainly, as far as I can tell, it certainly doesn't appear to be any worse as far as morbidity and mortality than, say, Delta or really any other variant of concern. I do see there are lots of people saying, well, if somebody goes to the hospital, if they go to the hospital, they get intubated, they get put on a ventilator, their outcomes are indistinguishable from Delta. And what do I have to say in response to that? Well, no shit. Okay, yeah, you go to the hospital and you get intubated for pretty much any viral infection. Your outcome is generally not going to be great, right? Okay, but just in general, it based on the data that we're getting from countries where Omicron is waning, I don't know, it's going to be what it is. There are some people that are saying, well, it's so incredibly contagious, so many more people are going to get it, and even though it may be less of a problem, the sheer numbers of people getting it will mean that more people will in fact have complications. Okay, maybe so. That doesn't seem to bear out in the South African data, and then people come back and say, yes, but those are primarily healthy people, young people, and then other people are like, yeah, but 20% of them have HIV and they're immunocompromised and they're doing well, and there's this back and forth. And, I don't know. Here's the way I see the situation, and this is just, again, this is my personal opinion on it. It's certainly not reflective of the opinion of my employer, and I'm going to get to that here in just a bit. Not my employer specifically, but just the broader context of the broader situation, which my employer is part of, or my primary employer, shall we say. Sorry, I'm kind of waking up here. Coffee injection. All right. So here is my opinion, if you will. I see what's going on with college lockdowns, and I'm going to call them lockdowns, right? Locking students in dorms, essentially, telling the youngest and healthiest portion of our population to take one for the team. In essence, that's what people are saying. Hey, these students, which are an almost insignificant part of the total population, these young, healthy people, we're going to tell them to stay in their dorm, lock themselves down, don't go anywhere, you'll get booted out of college. And God forbid you fail to get a college degree here in the United States, at least, because that's just a showstopper right now. Perhaps that's a video all of its own there. So we're really asking young, healthy people in the prime of their life, when some of the most important things that they're ever going to do are going to involve social situations, to just take one for the team, because they may is on their heads, so to speak, and we as older people are telling the youth, you got to take one for the team. That just runs so contrary to everything that I've ever known or experienced throughout my life, where it is the job of us as adults to try to attenuate the suffering that the youth experience, at least to the extent that they're still able to take on risks, engage socially, engage physically, figure themselves out, figure their environment out, right? I mean, there still has to be risk, obviously. There still has to be exploration. But it's always been my thought that we as adults, our job is to provide a secure environment that allows children, and I'm sorry if you're 20 years old, please don't take offense to me calling you a child, but in some ways you are a child in that where you're at in your life experience is very different than say someone like me, and it's just a travesty that we are stealing that from you all, right? And even younger kids, right? And God only knows what the psychosocial devastation, the developmental delays that we're going to see from all of this. Still looking at school lockdowns almost 2 years into this. This is just amazing. Just absolutely and utterly amazing that we're doing this, and that we're telling these people to take one for the team. And some of these old farts, right? And I'll include myself, I'm a 40 plus as well, but older people, the older you get, obviously the more risk factors you have, generally speaking, that they're now dictating this. And on one hand, I see them saying this. On the other hand, I go to Facebook, say, because that's where all the old people are still on Facebook. We don't know about that whole Instagram, Twitter thing yet. Being overly generalized here, of course. Right, and then on the other hand, they're telling college kids, hey, lock yourself down in your dorm, wear your mask, get quadruple vaxxed. And if you're in high school or if you're in elementary school, well, we're gonna shut your school down or do everything we can to shut your school down. Oh, and if you don't have a booster, you don't have 3 vaccines, we're gonna kick you out of school, right? And by the way, the most disadvantaged children are going to be the most affected by these policies, right? People that come from low socioeconomic status, people of color, right? These are going to be the people that are most impacted by these policies, right? These insane policies. So they're doing this, and then on the other hand, I go to Facebook and I see pictures of them, right? Everybody's doing duck face and holding a beer in their hand, and their heads are all squashed together at the ski lodge above Lake Tahoe as they're getting ready to go out and hit the lift for some runs, right? Or they're partying it up on some club in Ibiza or something like that, right? And it's just the utter hypocrisy of it is just utterly perplexing and fascinating. So what are my thoughts on all this craziness? Well, first of all, when it comes to boosting kids, I'm not aware of any strong evidence that boosters are super effective in kids. I think it's reasonable to suggest boosting, with a third vaccine to people who are a little older or maybe have comorbidities, maybe people like me, or I work in healthcare as well, and so I'm coming into contact with COVID a lot more than the average person, perhaps. I think there maybe is maybe a bit more reasonable to suggest that mandate. Yeah, that's another video, mandating. but I think that's a bit more reasonable. But if you're under the age of 30, say, or maybe even under the age of 40, the data isn't all that clear in my mind. And in my opinion, I suspect that if we had a larger interval, a larger spacing interval of the vaccine, we may not really even need boosting. I understand that the short interval, the 3 or 4 week interval between vaccines, it was really because they wanted to be able to test something rapidly. And we were in the middle of a pandemic, and lots of people were getting sick and dying and so on. And so I understand the urgency, but I suspect that, stretching that interval out 5-6 months between the first and the second dose may actually negate the need for this third dose. I think the booster may, in many cases, may just simply be correcting an interval that's too short. That's just kind of what I suspect. But again, going back to that, right, that hypocrisy is just pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. So what are my thoughts on all of this? Frankly, these draconian measures that a significant portion of the population seems to be incredibly ensconced in right now. It's really curious to see it. Well, here's my opinion as far as using the state, using a coercive capabilities of the state to enforce certain activities, right? First of all, that's a very broad instrument, and there are lots of long-term consequences that people need to think about, particularly in a highly individualistic society like the one that I live in. Now, perhaps that's different in other areas of the world, say China, where maybe they can be more draconian because of the overall cultural component of that is so different from, say, the United States. But forcing people, mandating, dangling their careers and their livelihoods, firing people to get people to do something, to engage in certain behaviors. I think people really need to appreciate the long-term consequences of that action, and we're certainly beginning, I think, to appreciate some of them, where you do have large numbers of people who have lost complete faith and trust in the institutions, and it's not entirely unreasonable that these people feel this way. But as far as I'm concerned, even thinking about taking these measures is just completely null, in my opinion. Particularly now that we have effective vaccines, we have some therapeutics, we have good strategies to attenuate much of the morbidity and mortality, right? We have vaccines now. And as soon as that started rolling out at the beginning of the year, in January, February is where most people were able to begin accessing these interventions, if you will. At that point, I think the conversation around using the coercive powers of the state should have ended. And there were a couple of months, it was right around April, May, June, right, 3-4 months where even where I live, which we have had some of the harshest lockdowns in the country. Particularly the second lockdown that we went into was amazingly harsh, very draconian, and I'm not sure that it really had any benefit when you take into consideration the totality of things. But be that as it may, the point that you have effective preventative strategies vaccinated people that are going to get sick. Yep. True. Absolutely. What are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? How much arm twisting are we going to do to get these people who are going to be highly resistant no matter what? How much arm twisting are we really going to do? And how much are we going to erode the thread, the fabric that holds society together in instituting these measures, right? In my mind, it's okay. We now have options. You can get vaccinated or not. I think we all understand the consequences, and you can deal with them or not. And I think a major argument is, well, that strains the healthcare systems, and I agree, absolutely, right? So I think we need to shift, our resources need to shift to the healthcare system now, to realizing, you know what, about as many people who are going to get vaccinated are going to get vaccinated. We're going to begin opening things up, right? Get kids in school, focus on helping kids out, because we have done an unfathomable amount of damage to the youth. I mean, there may be 2 generations that could potentially be seriously impacted by these measures that have been taken, and then shift resources toward the healthcare system in recognizing that, yeah, we may have large numbers of people who are going to get sick, going to be hospitalized, and so on and so forth, right? And we need to begin kind of opening things up. When I hear about colleges, and I work for a college that I have some issues with their policies, and I understand that they're following guidelines and recommendations and so on, but God, what a bunch of wimps, huh? Anyway, that's maybe a story for another day. But we need to get schools open. We need kids back in schools. We need kids engaging in the social activities, getting the nutrition, getting the support. This just needs to happen. And so that's my opinion right now. I want to be very clear. I'm not a policymaker. I don't impact policy whatsoever. So it's very easy for me in a lot of ways to sit here and opine as someone who will not face the consequences of specific policies, but just as somebody who is a part of society and who engages in the health system and is also a part of the educational system, right? I do hopefully have a broad view of the impacts of our behavior around COVID-19. And it just seems like there are a lot of people who are not appreciating the potential severe downstream consequences of these, frankly, coercive policies that have been put into place. And we're still talking about them almost 2 years into this, when we have effective vaccines and we understand the progression of the illness a little better, and we're beginning to develop therapeutics that may have varying degrees of effectiveness in terms of keeping people out of the hospital, preventing people from dying. So that's my opinion on what has been going on. I am not particularly concerned about the disease itself, about COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. I chose to become vaccinated. I did end up getting a booster fairly recently, and I'm just not all that concerned. It's quite likely that I'm going to get exposed if I haven't already, and it's quite likely that I'm going to get COVID-19 at some point, and I believe that I've taken good measures to protect myself, i.e. vaccination. I'm relatively healthy. I don't have metabolic syndrome. I'm very active, and so end of this is just this craziness has to stop. It really should have stopped at the beginning of the year when we started rolling out vaccines. The amount of damage that was done by rolling out vaccines, beginning to release some of these restrictions, and then Delta came, and we started locking things back down again in schools and all that. It's just utterly devastating on multiple levels. And anyway, that's my my humble opinion, if you will, on the COVID-19 situation. I think that our actions are probably more concerning now than the virus itself, and that's just kind of where I'm at. I know I'm probably going to let many of you down who perhaps fall in a different camp, but I hope at least you can just stop, pull back a little bit, take a look at the bigger picture, and realize that there are consequences to any kinds of coercive guidelines that are put into place. And on another point, before I conclude, there is a lot of evidence, a lot of really good data coming out from the United Kingdom, some preprint stuff in Nature Medicine that has been published preprint, looking at side effects, particularly of the messenger RNA vaccines, and we do see pretty strong signals, from what I can tell, that particularly the second dose and the booster doses of the messenger RNA vaccines, Moderna specifically, is strongly associated with myocarditis, pericarditis, and the signal actually seems to be stronger in the vaccine group than the group of people that get infected, get COVID-19, right? And furthermore, it seems to be the younger people under the age of 40, and a follow-up to that original paper shows that it's men and boys under the age of 40, which is kind of what we have been seeing, at least clinically. And so there comes a point where the risk-benefit analysis has to be taken into consideration, and the risks may outweigh the benefits, right? And if you're let's say you're a 20-year-old boy and you receive a dose of Moderna, what are the risks of getting that second dose compared to coming into contact with COVID-19? And I think we need to have a frank discussion about that. And I don't think that makes me anti-vax. I'm just looking at the data, and I'm going, we may have to update our guidelines. Maybe avoid Moderna, like many countries around the world are doing, are saying, hey, if you're young, you should not get the Moderna booster. You should look at something else, Chadox or AstraZeneca or perhaps the Pfizer, and take a more nuanced approach to risk-benefit analysis. So I just wanted to point that out as well, and it just seems like we're losing all sense of nuance in this craziness. And I could do a whole video on the total annihilation of our ability to make sense and to identify truth and to engage in productive dialogue in people that may have diametric viewpoints. And it just seems like we are completely incapable of doing that right now, and that is utterly devastating if we can't get through that impasse. So we'll see what the next year holds. I wish I could say I was hopeful, but frankly I'm not. I think things may have to get a lot worse at a societal level before we start making some breakthroughs. I don't know. Hopefully I'm wrong on that. So I hate to be such a downer going into the new year, but I think our society has a long way to go. We've got a lot of tough work, a lot of hard work ahead of us. And it really is a question of are we going to be brave enough, love in our hearts to seriously engage in that endeavor. I hope we do. All right, everyone, take care.